Milk is where baristas separate themselves. And this is where the SCA expects baristas to really be able to showcase their mastery over the beverage. When you walk into a shop and you order a latte, you know that you're getting for something special when you see silky smooth microfoam, and for a lot of people, being able to see some sort of design put on there that is visually aesthetic is going to be a nice sign that you likely will have a decent beverage. It is kind of the fruits of the labor, so to speak, of someone that takes their craft seriously. What we're doing here is trying to take essentially the knowledge that is typically gatekept at a high price and under multiple hours of required coursework, and we're throwing it into small chunk YouTube videos. So this is part 3. Go check out parts 1 and 2 if you want to begin with kind of an overview of coffee and then beginning to espresso. And now we're into kind of milk. We're going to talk about milk steaming, milk composition and chemistry, as well as pouring latte art, and we'll also go through kind of like the common milk beverages. And then we'll have one more in this specific series, and depending on how the series does, we can continue on to do some other topics, including brewing and more advanced things. So if you enjoy it, please consider hitting the like, hitting the subscribe, checking out the Patreon. All those things really help the channel, help the video, help the series. And yeah, anyway, let's continue going on. So to start off, we should talk about milk composition and why that matters. So we have fat, which can make up, depending on the percentage fat you have, whether it's skim, 1%, 2%, or whole. Whole milk tends to be around 3 to 4.5%, depending on just how fatty you like your milk. For me, the fatter the better. About 3 to 4% of that milk is protein, either whey protein, which a lot of you bodybuilders, you know what I'm talking about, take, or casein protein, which is also great for, late night protein. 4 to 5% would be lactose, which is going to be a great aid when we're trying to sweeten up a beverage, sweeten up an espresso to make a delicious silky milky cappuccino or latte. Then of course we have some random minerals, which largely we're going to, of course, have to mention calcium. Foam in dairy is primarily stabilized by proteins at the air and water interface. The casein and whey balance, as well as the processing, strongly affect the foamability of the milk as well as its structure. So for instance, when you're using skim milk, you're going to notice that foam becomes a lot more rigid and a lot less capable of being mixed in with the rest of the drink. With whole milk, where you have a lot more fat, you'll notice that it's much harder to create foam. And that's due to the content there, the fats, the amount of fats, the amount of proteins, and things along those lines. Casein micelles and whey proteins adsorb at bubble interfaces and reduce surface tension. That means like at higher protein and an inappropriate protein to fat ratio, that generally improves the foam height stability. As the freshness goes down, the capability of really nice foam also goes down with it. If you've ever foamed even slightly aged milk, even if it's not sour yet, you'll notice a rapid degradation in the foam capability of said milk. And then of course, if you're steaming soured milk, it will not foam at all. And the reason for this is due to what's called proteolysis, which I could be pronouncing that wrong, but that's essentially protein breakdown. Think in terms of like pyrolysis and roasting, right? It's the same idea, just with the proteins breaking down, and lipolysis, which would be the fats breaking down. And so over shelf life, you can have these things that are kind of occurring, and they also create off flavors, obviously, with soured milk. So if you use UHT and you're wondering why people online are getting beautiful, silky, milky, and you can't, it could be because of the UHT. You can get okay milk with it, but with the denaturalization of the proteins, you're not able to get the same style of silkiness you can get with a fresh milk. My first ever video on YouTube was an exhaustive how to steam your milk, and you can go reference that if you would like, because today we're going to zip through it. Steaming milk is so much more easy than people give it credit for. It's all about understanding the mechanics of it and then having the patience to actually learn it and making small changes based off of your machine itself. And in steaming, we essentially have two tools. We have our steam wand and we have our milk pitcher. We're going to use the hot steam wand in order to inject air into our milk. And then at some point, we're no longer using it to inject air, but we're using it for the momentum of propelling in order to get a whirl into our milk. The first phase is called stretching. So the milk itself is not doing much changing other than the fact that we are adding air in order to stretch the volume. Now, the way that we're adding air is by making a small gap between the tip of the steam wand and the surface of the milk. And this will inject air into the milk as it's heating up and allows proteins to kind of cover those bubbles and integrate it into the whole. You want to stretch early on so that you have a longer time to whirl and mix those bubbles into the full solution of the milk as it's heating up. So a steam wand's job is to give you steam, which is highly pressurized and high temperature water, to come out, and we're trying to inject that air, that steam into the milk, and then we're trying to submerge the steam wand at a specific angle to allow the momentum of the steam going into the milk to swirl our beverage. And this rapid swirling is going to cut up any big bubbles we may have formed into tiny micro bubbles. We don't want chunky bubbles and big visual bubbles in our coffee, not because of aesthetics, though also because of aesthetics, but because when you're drinking and you have massive bubbles, that's parts of your tongue where you don't have the espresso integrated. You want as small of bubbles possible so that the espresso can as evenly be integrated throughout the milk as humanly can be. Now, of course, you can also do a much drier foam, which means not as much integration, but still really small bubbles. And that will just take a longer stretching portion, which we can talk about here in a second. But what I always teach is 1/2 and 1/4. Now, what does that mean? That means we have our steam wand on our machine. We walk up to the machine and we slide our pitcher up so that the steam wand is in the spout of the milk pitcher, all right, our spout, and it's lined up against the back side of the wall. While maintaining contact between the steam wand and the spout, we are going to tilt the pitcher halfway from front to back, so like right here, and then 1/4 to one side, either there or there. We would slide it up the back, then you move it halfway, and you tilt to 1/4, or halfway, tilt to 1/4. The 1/4 is more so just to give us a nice number where we're not saying halfway and 1/8 or halfway and 1/12. But 1/2 and 1/4 will work on a lot of machines. If you find that you need a bit more whirling, then you can get even more aggressive with your angle, the pitcher tilt, and you can get that wand almost to the wall itself. If you do it during the stretching, there's more of a chance where you can over-inject air when you get closer to the wall, because the milk that is lapping around the pitcher will be a thinner layer the closer you are to the wall. And if you're stretching, then you might overburst some bubbles. So I would recommend, if you feel that you have a low enough pressure from the steam wand, you start 1/2 and 1/4, and then once you submerge, you go closer to the wall. So we start with it here. We actuate the steam wand, just meaning we turn it on, and then we slowly slide the pitcher, maintaining our angle of 1/2 and 1/4. I'm just doing it flat so you can see better, until the steam wand just begins to make a hissing noise. That hissing noise is evidence that we are injecting air into our milk. And we're gonna just stay at that hissing noise while holding our pitcher with both hands. So I always recommend 2 hands, one on the handle, one on the actual pitcher, so you can get a good feeling for the temperature as it's increasing. We're gonna maintain that position until the temperature of the pitcher matches the temperature of your hand. Now that is vague, I understand that, and it's because vague is fine here. I have been steaming milk for a decade. I have made more milk beverages than you can imagine, and I'm telling you, it's fine. Feel like maybe your arm or something, get a feeling for what that feels like, and once the pitcher matches that, so essentially it's not warm and it's not cool, you're done stretching. Which means if you want thicker foam, you need to be more aggressive during this part, meaning you need to surface more of the steam wand and have a more aggressive injection of air. And then once we have that temperature matching the hand temp, which is around 90, 100 Fahrenheit or so, we're just gonna resubmerge that tip just barely to where there's no more hissing. You don't need to dunk it, so that the majority of the velocity of the steam coming out of the steam wand is able to turn largely the top layer, which will in turn spin the whole solution. Now the idea is any big bubbles that are created will be whipped out with this final whirl. We're going to let it whirl until it is too hot to the touch. Another vague thing to say, I know. If you have a thermometer and you want to use that to get a perfect temperature, fine. But essentially, you're gonna steam until you're going, man, that's getting hot. That's getting hot, all right, that's uncomfortable. Now there's also a pitch change for those of you who might be more musically inclined that you'll be able to notice. And when it begins to pitch change on the dissension, then you're going to know at that point it's too hot. With just water, let's do an example. So first thing that you're going to do when you approach your espresso machine in a cafe is you're going to clear out your steam wand. The reason for that is because as it's sitting there, steam is going to condense and turn back into water. So when we open it up, you'll likely see there's a little water that shoots out, as you saw just there. So a little water came out. We just want to clear that out. All right. Then we want to wipe it down. This is good procedure on a bar. You with the rag right there. Now, don't burn yourself. If you don't have a dual-walled steam wand, then you want to do a multi-fold rag system, something like this, to where when you grab it, you know you're not going to burn yourself, okay? Just like so. We're going to just feed it up the back of the pitcher. See how it's laying against the back? Then we're going to tilt halfway, and we're going to go a quarter. And then we're going to actuate the steam wand while the tip is completely submerged. All right, and then we're going to slowly lower it, maintaining our angle until we hear the stretching. You hear that? Now, once it matches the temperature of my hand, now we resubmerge. You see, I didn't go all the way down here. I didn't need to, because right here it's done, and I'm letting it whirl out. Now, I'll just keep this up until it matches the temp of my hand. I'm not going to do that right now because there's a lot of liquid in here. The hiss gets even louder when we're using milk. So let's do the same practice, but we'll use some milk. We're going to hold this and we're going to clear it out. Just remember, then wipe. You always want to start like that. We're going to take the steam wand. We're going to go all the way to the back. We're going to go halfway and a quarter. Then we start it up. Now, controllably, see, it didn't start stretching till I allowed it to. We're going to sit there and stretch until it matches the temp of our hand. Now I just barely submerge and I'm letting it whirl. You see, there was a little late introduction. I was a little too risky with my placement. But now we're good. We're letting it whirl. And we're just letting it sit there and whirl until it's too hot to the touch. Ah, it's so nice. We're just sitting here waiting. This is quite a bit of milk, so it's going to take a while. But you see, the whirling of it is whipping out the bubbles, make it get nice and silky. Now, something I do want to quickly show if you get too close to the wall, you see how it thins up and goes up like that? That's something you don't want to do, especially during stretching. You get too close to the wall, it shoots up way too high. And this is another thing. You want to make sure that you have a wet rag. Even right after I was done, it immediately wanted to burn the milk against it. So what we can do is we can take a little hot water. Make sure we have hot water to wipe that off. You don't want to corn dog the wand. And then we clear it afterwards. Purge it on out. All right, so then we have our milk, which is silky smooth, absolutely delish. And we'll take a look at that. A little see-through cup. So now this is what people kind of tend to want when they go for lattes or they go for flat whites or something along those lines, is a milk. Here, we'll actually fill it up a bit more. A milk that's focused more on the texture than on having a ton of bubbles. So the idea is for it to be fully integrated with the espresso. So as you see here, we have foam, but it's microfoam. You can't see a single bubble. And when you pour this in with espresso, it completely integrates together. That way, it's essentially like it's all in one homogeneous solution. And that foam is incredible. Oh, wow. In fact, to show some of the foam, look at this. Look how beautiful that is. Oh. You can absolutely get a ton more foam than that. In the beginning process where I controlled that initial stretch, you can sit there and stretch a lot more aggressively. Granted, then you'll need to be really good at whirling in order to break down those big bubbles, but you can create a really thick head of foam. In fact, we will do that. We will do that, actually. So, I'm sorry. This is really freaking good. Let's go ahead and get a shot pulled, and what we're going to do is we're going to steam for a cappuccino. We'll do the thinner milk, the kind of more latte art type of milk here in a bit, but right now I'll do an old school kind of cappuccino where it's about 150 ml, 200 ml beverage, where it's a lot of foam, you scoop it out, and we have a good time doing it. I don't think I've ever done this on my channel, so we'll have fun doing that. Again, what I'm doing is I'm going up halfway and a quarter, and then we start our steaming. Now, as you'll notice, I immediately very aggressively stretch. You hear that? And it's because you want to stretch as rapidly as possible so you have as much time as you can to whirl all those bubbles together. So I'm still stretching because it's not the temp of my hand yet. Now it is. Now I'm just going to sit, and all of our stretching's done. We can't stretch anymore. Any stretching you do after about 100 Fahrenheit is going to result in big, big, big bubbles. We want as little bubbles as possible, though of course they'll be a bit bigger because how much foam we're creating. And there we have it. So there will be a bit bigger bubbles here, just due to the fact that we need bigger bubbles in order to make all of that milk get big. So now that we have done that, we have our thick cappuccino milk. Scoop it. You scoop it. You scoop it. And this will give you that really nice, picturesque type of cappuccino. All you can do is scoop as much as you want. You can make it as dry or as wet as you want. Obviously, I could have gotten less bubbles even had I gone a bit wetter, but we wanted to go for a really dry one. Then we're just going to pour straight in the center and go up until we get that nice brown ring around the edge. We could take all that foam off. And look, it doesn't even want to come off the spoon. It's so dry. Look at that. I mean, come on. There we go. But we have foam for as long as the eyes can see. Okay. Now you'll notice you're going to get a lot more bigger bubbles when you do this, and it's going to be a bit scary, but you got to commit. You have to get all the stretching out early in order to have thicker foam without big bubbles, because you need to start integrating the bubbles when the temperature reaches that of your hand. Let's get a cap foam milk massage. Fantastic. Now, when we're talking about making these beverages, we need to understand there are temperature limits. So when you ask for an extra hot coffee, you're actually likely getting a worse product. These proteins begin to denature at around 60 degrees Celsius. Specifically, the beta-lactoglobulin begins to denature around 60 to 75 Celsius, and excessive heat will weaken the foam stability and will weaken the flavor quite a bit. You're kind of burning it up. In laboratory testing, it has been shown that around 50 to 60 is ideal temperature, Celsius-wise, for your beverage to heighten the sweetness, heighten the foam capability, heighten everything that you're doing with your milk. Now, when it comes to alternative beverages like oat, you can get actually quite a bit hotter. Coconut, you can get a lot hotter. So if you're wanting to get something that's going to scald your tongue, I'd recommend not going the dairy route, because you're going to have a less than ideal experience with that, unless you just like denatured proteins and potentially curdled milk. Now, when it comes to the sweetness of milk, there is a perceived heightening of the sweetness, and it's not due to caramelization. The temperatures are not reaching the levels to caramelize sugars, but it's a physiological effect. So when we get up to those warmer temperatures around, in Fahrenheit, around 110 to 120, or we're getting around that 45 to 55 Celsius, that is where we're going to experience the sweetest milk. It's not due to caramelization. It's not hot enough for that in barista temperatures, but we are able to experience a sweeter sensation with that lactose becoming incredibly sweet on our palate. This is where you can really heighten the expression of a coffee by adding that sweet lactose milk. Even if you have lactose free, you can have a sweeter experience due to that dairy. All right, there we have that. Latte art is way more simple than you might give it credit for. All latte art is getting milk foam and you're painting on espresso foam with it. We are using the pitcher as our artist tool, like a paintbrush or something, and we are literally using the foam to sit on top of the foam in our cup. Then all that's going to happen is foam's going to lob out. The espresso foam is not strong enough on its own, so if we have a cup and you just try to start immediately laying foam on top of the espresso, it won't work. The density is not there, the foam thickness isn't there, the structure isn't there. So the first thing we have to do is what I call setting our canvas. In the same way a painter needs to stretch a canvas around a wooden frame, you need to set your canvas before you can begin to paint in your latte art. First thing you do is you're going to donate some of the foam and density from your steamed milk to your espresso. So we just donate a little bit of that until we've got, double the amount now of the espresso or triple the amount now of the espresso with milk. We have then effectively set our canvas. After the canvas has been set, we can begin to paint. Now, some people like to immediately begin painting after they set the canvas, meaning they get the spout proximity to the surface as close as possible in order for the foam to not sink and instead to skate out on top like an ice skater on a skating rink. Other people will donate the milk, then they'll stop and they'll restart because they find it's easier to have less motion in the ocean, so to speak. All right, once we have all of these tips, there is half foam, half dense liquid coming out. And as that enters into our cup, it is entering a foam layer and dense liquid. And so there's going to be a meeting of these. The one from our pitcher has velocity. The one here is a bit stagnant unless you have just given it a little bit of energy. If you've given it some energy, it wants to kind of wobble around and you might lose shape. You might lose a little bit of the siding, the angles, whatever you might be trying to pour. You won't be able to have as stable of a base if you've poured really aggressively. So when you pour, imagine if you were to look at it with food coloring and water, you would see ripples and Fibonacci sequences and different things going on in the cup. We have to remember that that is going on as we're pouring. So if we pour super aggressively, imagine the liquid's going down, hitting the cup, riding up the back, and it's going to explode along the edges, and it's going to break up our design. You pour really slowly, the foam is not going to want to leave the pitcher. The foam's going to want to adhere to the metal walls, and you're going to get just thin milk coming out, and you won't be able to make any type of art at all. So there are different things we need to understand when it comes to flowing. The first design we should learn to pour is the heart. Then we learn a tulip, then we learn Rosetta. In this video, I'll walk you through showing you and discussing it as I'm pouring each one, but just know this is going to take a lot of practice. Some people get it a lot earlier than others, and I truly believe that's due to the fact that if people grasp the visuals of it and what is actually going on in the picture to achieve the art, they tend to do a bit better. Of course, hand-eye coordination is important, but don't be frustrated if it takes you months to get the first design down, and these things happen. So anyway, let's go ahead and do a heart, and I will explain what I'm doing as I'm doing it. Again, we're going halfway and a quarter, then we start the milk. Controllably start our first stretch, very gentle. And I'm just letting it stretch until it matches the tip of my hand, as gentle as possible. If we don't add too many big bubbles, then we don't have much to worry about during the whirl. All right, matches the tip of my hand, and I just barely submerge it again. We just let it whirl. And there we are. We immediately wipe, clear it out, and here we go. So what I'm going to do first is, as I said, I'm going to donate some liquid. So we donate some in there. We've done donating. Now I'm going to tilt, get as close as possible, and start pouring faster and faster and faster. You saw I tilted the cup to where the liquid was all the way at the brim, and that's to get my spout as close as possible. The liquid that has the foam, that is the least density. It's going to sit up really high. If you are not very close, it's going to want to sink. If we want to have the milk sitting on top, the milk foam sitting on top, we have to get as close as possible. We start off kind of slowly until we see the foams kind of catching, and then you increase the speed. The more milk you put in your cup, the increased the viscosity is going to be in the cup. The higher the viscosity, the harder it's going to be to change. So you have to continually increase the speed of your pour as the cup is filling in order to make any type of morphology or changes. If I were to have started off really quickly and then slowed down, our heart would have been teeny tiny, because it would have initially taken the foam, but as the viscosity, the thickness of the foam began to increase, it would not have grown anymore because it needs more velocity in order to make way for itself. You're fighting against a losing battle if you're pouring slowly. Now, you'll see I started pouring closer to the back of the cup because where you want your shape to end is where you should begin it. So I wanted the heart to have the ending here. I didn't want the ending of the heart here. I wanted the ending here so the bottom would wrap into itself. Now, some people say cup tilt. No, it's a rotation along a certain axis, right? We're not just tilting the cup, that's random, but we are rotating it like so. So as I'm pouring, I have to rotate or it'll spill, but also rotating aggressively can help absorb the image into the cup, absorb the art into the cup. Now, next up, we have a tulip. All right, our shot's pulling, we clear out the steam one, and then we begin halfway and a quarter, and we control that initial stretch. Very gently stretching. Remember, everything is super controlled here. And if you feel you're not getting enough whirl, just tilt it a bit more to the side. Just don't let it get all the way to the wall. Stop that shot, it looks perfect. Now it's getting too hot to the touch, and we're gonna stop the steam wand. We're going to donate our milk, just a bit. Now we're ready, as close as possible, and we push the first layer. Then we push the second layer. Then we push the third layer. And there we have a 3-layer tulip. So as you see with that one, I started my first shape near the center of the mug because I wanted to push it and I wanted it to wrap. Some of the initial base wrapped into the design. It's because as we keep pushing it, we're creating a sinkhole effectively. That stream of milk going into it is creating a sinkhole, and it's sucking in some of the previous layers, but allows us to have this cool kind of hollow effect around the layers. So as you see, it's perfectly brown around those layers, even though some of that first layer is wrapping around. It gives a really nice distinct contrast between them. And then all I'm doing in order to make the follow through is I lift up because I want to create a sinkhole. When you lift it up, you're not letting foam sit on top and you're creating a sinkhole, and then I just cut through the center. Same thing with the milk. That's over here. It's a really gassy coffee, so so you can see the milk's not bubbling, but the coffee is. It's super gassy coffee. Now the final design to learn is a Rosetta. We'll do a very basic Rosetta here, but once you have these three, you can create anything you want. This is very similar to the initial heart as far as we donate some milk, then we get really close and we start off with that initial blob of foam that comes out. Then all we're going to do is very gently rock the pitcher to and fro. Now you don't want to do quick ripples, you don't want to do really slow ripples like this. You're going to rock the pitcher and it's going to lap the milk out and it's going to suck brown in between the lines of the foam. Then we kind of push forward and then we kind of pull back. Now as the density of that foam increases, as the thickness of viscosity goes up, we're going to have to increase our flow rate near the end. So let's go ahead and get this shot going. We'll clear out our steam wand. Halfway quarter, and we start. Controlled initial stretch. I'm just saying this every time so you know. Halfway and a quarter, then we control the initial stretch. Now this Breville pitcher is not optimal for the rocking motion, but we're going to do what we can with, you know, a suboptimal pitcher to show you can do it with anything. There are people who want to, you know, blame their equipment, blame their things. You can make latte art on any machine, even a Panarello steam wand. It just takes a lot more nuance, a lot more practice. But here we go. We have our milk ready. We immediately wipe off, clear it out, push it back. And we take here, tap bubbles out of the espresso, and then here we go. We donate our initial milk, we stop, we start up top, and we begin to ripple. Made a little spill, but there we have a Rosetta. What you see is we start by rippling and it wraps brown into it. We have to push down, and what happens as we're pushing down is the initial layers will come back because we're creating a sinkhole that's big as we rock back and forth. And so with every rock to this side, it's a sinkhole and it sucks up the bottom layers into it. We rock to this side, it creates a sinkhole and it sucks those layers back. We go forward and then we start coming back, and there's still a little bit of brown that is wrapped into these what we call leaves. Then you have to have enough room at the end to kind of create that top heart, which is just standing in one place, lifting, pulling through. So there we have our Rosetta. Now with the idea of pushing and stacking, this idea of rotating the cup and stacking and doing ripples should open up a lot of different designs for you. But that's kind of the basic beginning to latte art. Now again, I have Ultimate Guides to Latte Art, lots of other latte art videos you can check out, but this should be more than enough to equip you to begin down that path, starting with the heart. I always recommend start with the heart, then get into where you can start and stop with pushing on a tulip, and then get into a rippled heart, and then you can pull out of a rippled heart with a Rosetta. Oat milk is similar to dairy, the most similar there is, but you need to stretch a lot more aggressively in that beginning phase. It will not create foam nearly as easily because it's lacking those proteins that really allow for that foam creation and maintenance. Now, when it comes to almond milk, it wants to be a lot more watery, so you need to be really aggressive there as well with your steaming, probably even more so than you are with oat. And it will also need to be poured immediately because the foam wants to separate simultaneous to the ending of the steaming. Right when the whirl is done, it wants to separate. So you need to be quick with milk because the foam will separate, but even more so with almond milk. Coconut milk is going to be kind of chunky unless you have a really nice Barista Series 1, which has some added sugars in there that can help with the stabilization of foam. And then with the soy milk, you might run into curdling with some lighter roasted coffees, more acidic coffees. So be aware of that, as well as the fact that it just won't pour that well of latte art. The best bet you have is with oat milk as far as latte art goes. And there's also some unsweetened almond I have found does quite well from Pacific Barista Series. And then hemp milk and rice milk can do okay with kind of stacking, but they get really nice texture. With these, you don't really have as much of a limit with the temperature as you do with milk. You can go a bit hotter if that's what you like. You can also go a bit cooler if that's what you like. They're a bit more flexible in that regard. But as far as pouring goes, you should, and steaming, have the same exact kind of approach to it, just be more aggressive with almond milk and with oat milk. And with the others, just know that it's going to be a bit more difficult to get really pretty latte art because it doesn't want to separate and it doesn't want to kind of interact with the espresso foam nearly as well as something like dairy does with those caseins and whey. Typically, people think in terms of cappuccino like the one where you scoop out a ton of foam and then you pour. So it's the traditional 2 by 2 by 2, a 1 to 1 to 1 ratio of espresso to milk to foam. Now, this is what a lot of people do expect with cappuccinos, but you'll not likely get that in most specialty shops. In most specialty shops, there's not really a recognized difference between cappuccino and flat white. If there is, it's a minuscule amount of foam, and they're still pouring it straight from the pitcher as opposed to scooping. So cappuccinos tend to just be essentially 150 to 200 ml beverage with a double shot, maybe a single shot of espresso, and sometimes in places around the world they have their identifying marker with a bit of cocoa powder on top. Flat white, if there is a distinction, is just a double shot of espresso, and then they'll do a little thinner milk. But for the most part, it should still be capable of latte art, not being too thin to create the designs on top. When you have a latte, that's essentially just a bigger flat white or a bigger cappuccino that you see in specialty shops. So something that's more like 250 or above milliliters in the cup, and a double shot of espresso. So thin, kind of silky milk where you're capable of doing latte art. You'll have that nice microfoam layer about a centimeter thick on top, should be, once all is said and done. Then a macchiato would be a demitasse, so a little espresso cup with your double shot or single shot of espresso, and then it's essentially dolloped with microfoam, so you would pour with steamed milk into it. Now, there are places that might want to just scoop dry foam and put it on top, and that's also something you might run into. It just depends on where you're at, whether you get dry foam or you get the microfoam. Then finally, we have like a cortado, that's also referred to as a piccolo or Gibraltar around the world. This is up to interpretation. Cortado in some places, very few, but some places will have kind of sugar in it with really hot milk. But in most places, what you'll get if you order one of those three is either a single or double shot, small 4 ounce or about 100 milliliter beverage that is half espresso and then half lightly heated milk. So a lot of times they're doing it to around 110 or so Fahrenheit or around 48, 50 degrees Celsius. So it's something you can consume quite quickly. It's something that goes in to help stave off some of the bitterness of the coffee, improve kind of the sweetness and the mouthfeel while you still get some of the nuances of the coffee. Obviously, the more milk you add, the more you're taking away from the coffee and the more it's going to be milk forward. What we've seen in a big survey that was done about a decade ago is people expect flat whites to be in thick-walled ceramic mugs. Cappuccinos are sometimes served in glasses like this, so just to differentiate, we'll do cappuccino here, flat white there. I'm going to steam all the milk at once and do what's called milk sharing and divide it so that I can get more foam with the cappuccino, a little less with the flat white, but we're going to steam in this bad boy. Now again, I'm pulling singles just to use less coffee. Some places may do more than a single, they may do a double in these, but for simplicity, I'm gonna go like this. All right, so in order to share the milk, I'm going to pour, kind of slowly begin with to keep some foam back. And we'll do our flat white first, since we wanted just a little bit less foam. Then we're gonna pour. All right, so there we have our flat white. And then for the cappuccino, a little bit extra foam should be left in the pitcher. Normally when I milk share, I wouldn't do it this way. I would want it to be a bit more evenly dispersed of the foam. But because I'm trying to keep a little extra foam for the cappuccino, I did not go back and forth. So on the cappuccino, we're gonna go. And then we'll just do a simple, like so. All right, so this is what you'll typically see for a cappuccino versus a flat white. Something with a little thinner milk that's able to do a lot more intricate pattern, and then something that has a bit more foam on the top, like you see right here. Now we can do the macchiatos. I'll do one of each. I have still milk left over from the last, so you can continue to milk share. We're just gonna scoop out some of the dry foam from the top. Do a couple of scoops there. You have kind of your traditional style macchiato right here. Then for this one, we'll actually just pour the microfoam in, and we have kind of a more modern style of macchiato. Now for those who might want a little more volume in it, you can always add a little extra milk. For my last trick, I'm going to milk share again for the latte and cortado, again, single shots each. But like I said, it depends on where you're at, where you'll get a double or a single. You can always make sure to request a double if it's not standard. But we're going to use the big pitcher again, and here we go. All right, so now I will do more of a milk sharing technique. I'm going to pour more than I need into the pitcher to begin with, and then I'm going to pour back a little bit just to maintain a more even splitting of the foam. There's our latte, which is closer to 250, 300 mils or so. Now what I'll do to get good foam for the rest, I overportion milk just a bit, is I'm going to pour all of it in and then pour down until what I need, and we should have a good amount of foam for this cortado. Now, a lot of you will be perceptive and note that, well, what's the difference other than just size? You nailed it right on the head. For the most part, coffee shops recognize the difference between these being the amount of milk you're adding. Now, if you're at a really old school shop, especially for the US, where they ask if you want a small, medium, or large cappuccino, you're in for a ride. Who knows what you're going to get? And as I say, as the coffee sits, the foam will separate. But if we were to take a spoon and push back, you will see even on the latte, there's like a centimeter or so of foam. Even on the cortado, there's about a half a centimeter of foam. On the cappuccino, about a centimeter of foam. On the flat white, about a centimeter of foam, depending on the narrowness of the cup, the depth of the cup, etc. So, and of course, in the macchiato, we have just a lot of foam sitting on top. Without any further ado, that is the milk session. If you need to go watch the espresso one, it's right before, and before that is the kind of coffee basics. And then if you like these series, please let me know below so I know that it's something to continue working on. Otherwise, I'll see you in the fourth and final video of this initial series on getting your coffee education without paying an exorbitant fee and without having to take 7, 14, or 21 hours worth of classes in order to get the knowledge. Thanks for watching. Again, hit the like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Bell for notifications if you want to be notified with my face. But that's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you brew something tasty today. Cheers.